Stunning new detail about the murders of the 4 college students in Idaho. The alleged killer appeared in court Thursday as investigators released an explosive affidavit outlining the evidence against him. Kana Whitworth is in Moscow, Idaho with the latest. Good morning, Kana.
Michael, good morning. So that affidavit says that not only did one of the surviving roommates hear a male suspect that night, but saw one as well. It also says that authorities gathered phone records based on a search warrant to see if Kohberger stalked any of the victims or conducted surveillance on their home. And those records showed that he had been in that area at least a dozen times prior to the murders, all in the late evening or early morning hours.
This morning, as Brian Kohberger is held without bail in Idaho, charged with the murder of 4 college students.
Do you understand?
Yes.
A newly released affidavit revealing chilling new details from one of the surviving roommates says she was woken up around 4 a.m. that night by what she thought was Kaylee playing with her dog upstairs. Shortly after, she thought she heard Kaylee say, "There's someone here." The roommate looked out of her bedroom but didn't see anything, then looked out again when she thought she heard crying from Xana Kernodle's room. It was followed by a male voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." The roommate opening her door a 3rd time, standing frozen as she saw a man clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose, noting he was athletically built as he walked toward her, getting so close she could make out his bushy eyebrows. He then walked right out the sliding glass door. The roommate then locking her door, and police not contacted for another 8 hours. The affidavit also stating police used surveillance footage and cell phone data to place Kohberger near the victim's home before, during, and after the crime. Based on cell phone data, police suspect he was in the area at least a dozen times in the months before the murders and returned the morning after. But the night of, police believe Kohberger turned his phone signal off at 2:47 a.m. until 4:48 a.m. It was just about 4:04 in the morning when video captured his white Elantra passing the victim's home. The car not seen again until about 16 minutes later, 4:20, speeding off. Then at 5:30 a.m., after his cell phone signal was back on, data shows Kohberger traveling back to his home in Pullman from Moscow. Overnight, the family of one of the victims, Kaylee Gonzalez, now speaking out after coming face to face with the suspect in court for the first time.
His demeanor was disheveled, beaten, surprised, overwhelmed. He didn't have the swagger that I think he thought he was going to have being put in that type of situation. I think you see somebody who feels overwhelmed and defeated.
Kaylee's father, Steve, who's been relentless in his pursuit of answers, telling ABC News overnight he wants to make this as uncomfortable as possible for the defendant.
I want him to feel and see what he's done. And if that means we have to be uncomfortable and we have to go through some things, then we will.
We're also learning new details about the evidence law enforcement used to track down Kohberger. Police stating they discovered DNA on the button snap of a tan leather knife sheath that was on the bed next to the body of victim Madison Mogan. Police say they later linked that DNA to Kohberger by collecting his father's DNA from trash outside the family's home and matching it to their sample from the crime scene.
Now, Kohberger did not enter a plea yesterday. He does maintain his innocence. He has a status hearing set for next week. And you guys, that will happen the day after classes resume here at the University of Idaho.
Okay, Kana, thank you so much for that. Let's bring in ABC News chief legal analyst Dan Abrams and ABC News contributor and former FBI agent Brad Garrett. And Dan, I'm going to start with you. How strong is the prosecutor's case?
This is a really powerful affidavit. The way they're able to link the car and the phone back to Kohberger, back to his house, to the crime scene, and then returning to his house later is really astonishing. And then on top of that, you have a very powerful piece of DNA evidence from the scene linked back to him. You read through this and you see the police work. You see how they went through all the surveillance videos. You see how they were able to piece this together and then finally make the arrest. It's rare that I've seen a document this powerful in terms of the different kinds of evidence they were able to use and put it all together and link it to Kohberger.
Let's bring in Brad and talk about that powerful piece of DNA evidence that you just mentioned. Brad, authorities say that they found DNA on a knife sheath and that they ended up being able to link it to his father through a familial match. Is that a pretty critical piece of evidence here?
There is no doubt. This case concerned me from the beginning. If you didn't have a direct link to the crime scene via the suspect, this could have stayed unsolved. So that, I think, is really the biggest piece. The car is terrific, but the car doesn't put him in the house. The DNA does.
Let's talk about a lot of the evidence that authorities say they had, and they do say that they found a lot of it. You mentioned the car, they've got video of the car, they've got cell phone data. Given his background in criminology, does it surprise you that they found all this evidence?
Well, just because he has a background in criminology doesn't mean that he's criminally sophisticated. And so, you know, he left his DNA there. He drove around way too much. I mean, he's spotted there over 12 times up to November 13th. Those are things that a seasoned criminal wouldn't do. So, yes, did he know enough to turn his cell phone off? Of course. But he made big mistakes.
Dan, what could the defense possibly be?
They're going to attack isolated piece of evidence, right? They'll say you can't rely on cell phone evidence. It goes from tower to tower. They'll say that the car, initially they said it could be from 2011 to 2013, Hyundai Elantra. Now they expanded it to, it's 2015. They'll attack the DNA evidence, et cetera. So what prosecutors will do is they'll try and put it all together the way I just talked about. The defense attorneys will attack individual pieces of evidence.
And Brad, I want to ask you, police records say they showed his cell phone was in that area around the victim's home at least 12 times, as you said a little bit earlier, at least on around 12 occasions, over the span of several months before the murders happened. What does that tell you?
It tells you that he's building up to do it. He's doing surveillance to decide who's in the house, when they're in the house. This is a guy that planned this murder, I think that's probably fantasy-driven, for months until he finally got up enough nerve on November 13th to do it.
Is this heading for a plea, Dan?
I don't know. I mean, I think he may take this to trial. You know, there are questions, right? What was the motive, et cetera? You don't need a motive in a case like this. So I don't know what the plea would be. The plea would have to be guilty.
Dan Abrams,
Stay
thanks very
tuned.
much.
Yeah.
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.